Hey, welcome to 9394, a music podcast with me, Travis Roy. I am so happy to have you here with me. I'm so happy to do this podcast because it allows me to do some fun things, such as last episode I talked about one of the most obscure bands I've ever done on the show, if not the most obscure band, Icky Boyfriends. And here we are, just a week later or so, talking about the biggest band and the biggest album from the era. I am happy to have back on the show regular contributor to 9394, Mike Krupinski, here to talk about the almighty Nirvana and their album, Nevermind. Here it is. Hey man, how you doing?
What's going on, Travis? How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, brother. Pretty good. How you been?
I've been good, man. You been doing all right?
Yeah. Things are pretty good. You know, busy. Like I said, work. Busy with new music.
Yeah.
Working on new music.
That's
busy
great.
With, busy with the current stuff that we're doing musically, and so it's just it's a juggling act. And I don't want and I don't want to drop any plates when I start plate spinning either.
You want to go ahead and jump into this?
Yeah, we talked about this a long time ago, so it's finally come up, and so yeah, I'm ready to go as much as you are. Sure.
Yeah, and this show is called 9394. The whole point is that we look at albums from that era, but I'm not a stickler about the exact years. I think it's really important to get into albums that we were listening to at that time as well. And when people come back on for the third time, which this is your third visit, Mike, thank you for coming back, I often encourage them to look at a list of albums that I'm suggesting to get into that are not necessarily strictly from 1993, 1994. And only a few people have come on for a third or fourth time where they would be doing that. Quite a few people have looked at that list, and you were like, I am doing this album. And you had no compunction, you had no hesitation. You're like, this is the album I'm doing. Which album are we doing, Mike?
Yeah, so the album we're doing is from 1991. It's probably the biggest impactful record of the 90s, and that invites a lot of conversation when I say that, but the album is Nirvana's Nevermind.
Yeah, it's hard to argue the cultural importance of this album. It seemed like a big deal at the time, and it stayed a really big deal ever since.
The thing about this record is not only did it have a cultural impact and a social impact and an economic impact, but it's one of the few records that, if you look through musical history, that had a generational impact. The fallout from the record is still being felt today, but through the 90s, the legend of the record continued to grow after its release. And as many have said, it took on a life of its own. It still has that life today, much like the Voyager spacecrafts that are out way beyond Neptune and Pluto in outer space. They still have staying power and a life of their own, and they still communicate to their listeners on a large scale. That's very difficult for a record to do, is to have that sustainability. This one definitely has that.
Yeah, this has a lot of staying power, but I do feel the need, and always have felt the need, to push back a little bit about the whole voice of a generation thing. I'm not saying that it's not hugely important. Obviously it is. But I feel like a certain amount of overemphasis is placed on this album and on this band, which I think is ultimately in part what led to the taking of his life, Kurt Cobain, because all this shit was being heaped on them that wasn't even necessarily true. I mean, they definitely were coming from a subgenre of music that was growing and getting big. I mean, without any, before Nirvana popped and made it huge, like REM was getting really big with Out of Time, for instance. And Pearl Jam's 10 was a really big deal, although I can't quite remember if it came after this or before it, but I feel like it was before. Wasn't it 1990?
I think it came out right around the same time.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah, you mentioned that. And, Soundgarden had Bad Motorfinger that same year.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying that like any of those bands would have necessarily pushed us to the same level that Nevermind did, but I feel like a lot of these bands collectively did that. And then as a culture, because we like to like do the whole great man theory thing, or like just kind of boil everything down to one point and make it easily digestible, we've pointed at Nirvana and Nevermind is like, this is the one that tipped everything and changed everything.
I agree with you, Travis, on the phrase "the voice of a generation." I think it's complete bullshit, and I'll tell you why. Because the media tends to run with catchphrases, so people will either read their publications, watch their TV shows, or buy into the narrative that if someone comes up with a catchphrase, that is the be all that ends all, and that defines a person, place, or thing. For instance, much like the term grunge music. Okay, they had to call it something. Okay, so then it catches on. I don't think it does Nirvana justice to call Kurt the voice of a generation, and even he didn't like that either.
Yeah.
And then that's fine. You can't quantify a voice, but what you can quantify is you can quantify a body of work that a musician can do, can write.
Sure. And you can quantify sales. This album went diamond, which doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, and so what Kurt proved before Nevermind and after was that he's one hell of a songwriter. But this record in particular, though, if you have to look at any angle, okay, if you look at a coin, you look at one side, the other, or if that damn thing stands on its side, stands on its end and rolls away, you're going to analyze and take a look at it. And so I think Nevermind has been probably one of the more scrutinized records from the time period because of the impact that it had. Based on, I think I might be right about this, but I don't know. I have to get your take on this too. Based on the Smells Like Teen Spirit video in rotation on 120 minutes on MTV.
It's daytime MTV, right? I mean, Weird Al did the version. The ubiquity of that song. Now, usually I start this conversation with, how did you get into this album? But I think we just got into it. We just talked about it. It Smells Like Teen Spirit, right? That song was inescapable when it came out as a single.
Yeah, like I said, it got traction on MTV with 120 minutes. But
sure.
If it wasn't for Amy Finnerty at MTV, who ran to her bosses and basically broke down their door and said, hey, you've got to play this video. You've got to hear this band. Damn good song. If she didn't go to bat for Nirvana, that video doesn't get the airplay that it does in 120 minutes. And then all of a sudden it spins off into other day parts on MTV, blows up, becomes huge. And then all of a sudden there's this trickle down effect because you're seeing the video on MTV and then all of a sudden radio stations above the college level now are getting requests for the song. It's into AOR rotation or whatever, alternative rotation, all the different rotations at that time. And all of a sudden a tornado around this song is forming. And if you also remember back in that time period, Travis, alternative rock bands in the early 90s were basically no more than tax write-offs for record labels. Because they felt, well, hey, if they sell 25,000, 50,000 records, hey, we'll break even, we'll just write it off.
Yeah. I think that this highlights a point that I've touched on in the show, but maybe haven't properly delved into. Well, I mean, it's been a while maybe. But MTV really had their thumb on the scale of what was and was not popular at this time, right? I mean, they are like nothing now. They have no cultural relevance that I am aware of at this point in history. But at that time, yeah, they could make or break a band. And you're right, man. The radio stations were a good step behind on MTV, which makes you think, well, how much of this is the visual medium of the video that also had this impact? Because it was so like counterculture. You know, we were just drenched in New Kids in the Block and MC Hammer and Nelson and just like the worst shit for a long time. And then come, you know, these fucking Canvas All-Stars and like these anarchy symbol tattoos on the cheerleader girls, and like everybody's just so fucking sullen and flannel clad, of course, and it just like set fire in our culture.
But you also had bands like Loverboy and Poison and Cinderella, all these hair bands at that time that if it wasn't for Nirvana, they may have had more staying power on MTV, but people wanted to change. They wanted something different. And, you know, when you see the Smells Like Teen Spirit video, the first thing that comes to mind, and it's in the Come As You Are book that Michael Azerrad put out for Rolling Stone.
Who didn't read that, right? From our generation.
It's a version of Rock and Roll High School. It's a version of Pep Rally Gone Bad. And all of a sudden you start to see, like you were talking about, the anarchy, the rebellion, the cheerleaders, and Kurt flailing his guitar around in the video. Kids are starting to rebel, and oh, wait a minute, by the way, these guys kind of look like us. They're like our age, they're jumping around, they don't care about shit in the world, and here it is. Well, they do care, but they don't care. Their energy is just so powerful when you see it on screen that you're like, okay, yeah, I'm buying into this. What are these guys about? And so that video had a more far-reaching impact, I think, than when it was first shot.
Yeah.
Because once it hit MTV, there was no stopping it.
I feel like there was this thing going on in the 80s where conspicuous consumption and, you know, just the yuppies and all that stuff, it was really embraced. And then the 90s come and it's, you know, it's relative peace and prosperity, especially for, you know, yours and my lifespan. It was a pretty gentle time in terms of what was happening here in the States. But we were a pretty bitter and like angsty bunch. And now that part of that is because you and I would have been like in our young teens or like mid-teens at the time. So like I was 11. I don't know how old you were, but like at that age, you know, we were starting to get angsty, starting to be like, I just need something to vent these unhappy feelings that I'd never really felt before, but don't know how to shit out. And stuff like Nirvana and other bands that they helped pave the way for in terms of popularity, they did give us a very much needed outlet, however much there wasn't that much terrible going on at the time. We all had our own lives and we all had that normal stuff of just the angst of living that we needed that kind of a release. And I think we were sick of the sugary pop of the early 90s and even the hair band, all that shit. Compared to Nirvana, all that shit was so inauthentic and bullshit, and we were done with it.
Yeah, think about what was going on culturally, politically, and just socially at the time in 1991. We had the Gulf War in Iraq early on in the year. George Herbert Walker Bush was president of the United States.
We had the riots, of course, Rodney King and all that shit.
Yeah, that was in 1990. That was in 1992.
But the video was 91. Yeah.
You also had the Clarence Thomas hearings for him to become a Supreme Court justice and all of the hoopla that was surrounding that from his past. So what you had was you had all this stuff shoved in our face, the Gulf War, these hearings. You had all this stuff that I don't think teenagers and 20-somethings really gave two shits about, okay? And so when you have all this stuff that's on the conscience of a country and constantly being shoved in your face, you want something different. You're looking for something different.
Yeah.
And at the time, the music, like you were saying, you're coming out of the 80s and Yuppieville and everything, and it almost seems like a perfect storm was about to happen, okay? As soon as the decade turns to 1990, things start to change, and then all of a sudden, when Nirvana comes up, and like I said, the video comes up, the record comes up, and then from August of 91 to October of 91, there's this huge sea change. Nirvana starts to become more relevant, popular. People are starting to listen to what this band has to say through their music. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like overnight, Travis. Everything started to change and go in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
And kids of Generation X loved the hell out of it. Loved it because now they finally figured out that there are bands out there speaking their language.
Yeah, and I feel like also what was going on before that and kind of during was all that Tipper Gore stuff, all that fucking parental advisory shit. There's congressional hearings on Two Live Crew and Madonna and all this stuff that was just considered so beyond the pale. And then this comes out, and it's like they wouldn't even know how to fucking contend with this. They could contend with body count and iced tea and all that shit because they can be like, this bad, but like this was so beyond like their understanding. The rage, the screaming, but the beauty too, and the loud, quiet, loud. But it was just like they wouldn't even know what the fuck to do with it. So it's like, oh, you are gonna try and police our listening habits? Well, what do you think of this?
The thing that made Kurt such a great songwriter was he didn't have to cuss in his lyrics.
No.
Like here and there. But what he did is that he was able to scream and he was able to convey his message at fever pitch, which means that he stayed within the boundaries, okay, which probably also pissed the Tipper Gores of the world off, too.
Absolutely.
It's great because you walk up to the line, you don't cross it, but here I am, ha ha ha, this is what I'm saying, and you can't touch me because I'm not violating any of your stupid laws and any of the things that you want to suppress,
Right. I mean, you look at the lyrical content on this album and the stuff that's being covered, I think there's like one F word screamed at one point that's barely even noticeable, if I recall correctly. But there's so much societal critique happening here and so many unpleasant things that we're spending time with. But let's dig in a little deeper and a little more personal about it. Let's get to the big question here, because I know you have struggled, or at least I assume you have. I've struggled with this question. What's your favorite song on this album, Mike?
Actually, this one's kind of easy for me, Travis,
Good.
because, yeah, man, I've listened to this album, I would probably say, tens of thousands of times. Okay. And that's not an exaggeration because when you love a record as much as I do like that, you can't get enough of it.
Sure.
And even today, I listen to it. It still has the same emotional impact on me as it did years ago. So, but my favorite song on the record is Come As You Are.
It is a beauty, right?
Because of the melody, the vocal melody in the verse, the guitar tuning itself, it's tuned a whole step down. And the video is really cool. I like the video and the kind of warbly, watery kind of feel to it because that's kind of how the song feels. And just the tone of the song and kind of the feel of it all the way through gave me the feeling that, this song it does something to you when you hear it. So for me, that's kind of my favorite song. I know that it gets comparisons to the Killing Joke song 80s at the beginning. The melody is exactly the same, and Kurt got a lot of flack for that. But I didn't even realize until years later when I put the two songs together. But I think that's just the subconscious melody theft that Kurt went through. And like I said, it's such a great verse melody. That's why I love the song so much.
And it's got a great message, again, I don't know that. I mean, his stuff is so interpretive until it's really obvious, But that one definitely, it seems like, has struck a chord more than almost anything else that he wrote. There's documentaries and the book that you mentioned, and it's just like, come as you are, it's just such a simple thing of acceptance. I don't know if that was necessarily what he was going for, but that's certainly what I always got out of it.
You watch the video, Travis, and this is a really good Easter egg to find. And I didn't figure this out until I think last year. So in the video, Kurt has his punk rock red hair that he dyed with Kool-Aid, okay? When they shot the video, okay? But when you go back and you watch the ending of the video where they come up on the last chorus of the song, in the background you can see another image of Kurt, and Kurt has short blonde hair. So what I think they did was they reshot some footage after he cut and dyed his hair back to blonde, and you see it in the background. He's leaning against a wall. I just noticed that last year. I've seen this video for years. I never picked it out. I mean, even to this day, I'm still finding little nuances in watching the video. So for me, it's kind of a little Easter egg to tell people about. They go back and they say, oh my gosh, I never saw that.
That's fun. I struggled to pick mine because I had the same song that was my favorite, like, growing up. And so I thought that coming back to it now, because it had actually been a while since I spent any real time with this album, to be honest with you. So I thought I was going to still feel the same way about On a Plane. But no, my favorite song, I'm an older, sadder man now. And Something in the Way is the song that speaks to me the most, by far.
Top is sprung a leak, and the animals I've trapped have all become my pets, and I'm living off of grass and the drippings from the ceiling. It's okay to eat fish, 'cause they don't have any feelings. Something in the way, something in the way, yeah. Something in the way. Something in the way, yeah.
You see, as we get older and our perspectives change and our thoughts change, songs hit you differently through time.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, Something in the Way is kind of a more melancholy, sad, kind of like a mourning type of song. And I've heard the electric version on bootlegs. I'll be honest with you, it doesn't have, to me, the same impact emotionally as the acoustic version does, like the recorded version. I like the acoustic version of that song a lot better.
And for me, a lot of it is the cello that helps a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
And that intense personal vocal recording, like it sounds like the mic is like inside of his mouth or something. Like it's so up close, And for me, over the years, I kind of got away from Nirvana in a lot of ways, except for the acoustic album, the Unplugged album. That was like my touchstone with them for a long time. So I guess it kind of makes sense that coming back to this now, that would be the one that I love the most. But Polly didn't really grab me. But this song, yeah, Something in a Way is so mournful. It's such a heavy-hitting song, like an emotional wallop. And as a kid, I was just like, oh, okay, that's a quiet song at the end. I was just like, okay, whatever. Like I would maybe even like not even necessarily listen to it because it wasn't like the vibe of the rest of the album. And now it's the one I want to listen to on repeat.
Yeah, see, as your energy changes, through your life, the songs do hit you much more, with an impact on some angles as you get older. That one, when I first heard it, I was kind of in the same opinion that you are. I'm like, okay, this is kind of like a soft acoustic song, and I guess I'm not really paying too much attention to it because, I'm waiting to see how long the silence is after the song to get into Endless Nameless. I'll be honest with you. I'm counting the minutes after that song going, when is that damn song going to play? I totally overlooked Something in the Way a lot of times, when I was younger.
So Endless Nameless, was that a secret track back in the day? Because I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, so what happened was that the first 50,000 pressings of the CD did not include that song. Oh. So if you're one of the lucky ones to have the first 50,000 pressings and it's not on there, those are like collector's items. So,
I guess we did. I mean, yeah.
What the band wanted to do was Kurt wanted to screw around with the audience and put all this silence from Something in the Way and then put this hidden song like 10 minutes and change afterwards. So like about the 19-minute mark of Something in the Way on your old CD players, all of a sudden you hear this low groaning guitar sound. And when I first heard it, I'm like, what the hell is this? And then all of a sudden you start to hear it and there's thrashing and there's this low guitar tune song and it's just nothing but a bunch of noise. And so they wanted to include the song on the CD because of its folklore. It's become a huge part of the record now because of the story behind it. So, like I said, if you're one of the lucky ones that has one of the first 50,000 CDs pressed and it's not on there, those are like gold items,
Well, actually, looking back, I don't think we even had it on CD. I think we had it on cassette. And I say we because it was like, me and my brother and my sister, we would have shared albums at that age. And like one of us would get it and the other two would record it on cassette, just on the boombox or whatever. And so, I don't imagine that the hidden track would have been on the cassette. So that's probably what happened there, because I never heard that song until recently, until the last couple of weeks, listening to it, getting ready for this episode. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, you're like, what the hell is this?
What is this doing? Shitting all over my favorite song on the album here. It's like takes away from the emotional resonance that's left by that song for me.
Yeah.
Because I have no connection with it,
Right. Yeah, they used to introduce it as the secret song at their shows, and people were probably, in the same mind frame as you, like, what the hell is this? But then once you get to know it, you almost develop your own personal relationship with the song. Like, how angry do you want to be when you hear this song? Because it's got this angst to it, okay, when they hit their high points. And then Dave Grohl's drumming at the end of it. I mean, they're just bashing the shit out of their instruments. And then you can hear at the end of it, at the recorded part, you can actually hear Kurt destroying his guitar.
Yeah, you can.
There's just like feedback from the pickup at the end of the song. And you're thinking, okay, yeah, he destroyed it and he probably walked away from it.
So we've talked our favorites. We've talked the hidden track. Let's dip into the unpleasant side of things. Could you identify a track on this album that is your least favorite?
Yeah. There actually was one. And I'll preface it to you like this. So our good friend Dustin Lintz over the years hosted a lot of Nirvana tribute shows. I was lucky enough to have done 6 of them.
Oh, wow.
Over the time.
That's cool.
And I was thinking back to how many different songs off how many records of the Nirvana records have I played. And I can say with certainty that I've played, even Endless Nameless, I played 12 of the 13 songs live at one or another of Dustin's Nirvana shows. And the one song that I never played is the one song that I don't like, and it's Stay Away. For some reason, the song just doesn't hit with me.
Really?
It was an early song that Kurt started to write during the process of the Nevermind songs. It was one of the first ones. And it was called Pay to Play for so long, just until they recorded it. He changed the lyrics and stuff. And then I would go ahead and listen to it. And since it wasn't hitting with me, every time I'd play the record back again afterwards, I would just skip over the song because it just, like I said, the song is kind of, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. But I'm interested to hear what your least favorite song is.
I actually felt like Stay Away was one of the standouts for me on this visit, but I can understand that, especially if you felt like that over the years and like you have stuck with this album in a way that I didn't. So for you to like have that sustained feeling about the song makes sense, whereas I had not visited it in a long time and it was almost what the fuck is this? I forgot about this one. But for me, I really struggled. This was the hardest part for me. I was able to identify my favorite and my underrated. Easily, my underrated was pretty easily figured out, but man, I really struggled with the least favorite because, I mean, they're all so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a bad song on the album, so it really was hard for me to choose. But if I'm really honest with myself, I feel like I'm going to get some flack for this because it's kind of a favorite of a lot of people's. But I like the acoustic Nirvana, and I really like the like incesticide, like crazy Nirvana. It's the in-between Nirvana where I start to kind of lose interest. And for me on this album, it's Lithium.
I'm so happy, 'cause today found my friends are in my head. I'm so ugly, that's okay, 'cause so are you. Book on mirrors, Sunday morning is every day for all I care. And I'm not scared, light my candles in our days, 'cause I found God. Yeah!
I mean, it's a good song, but it just feels like, well, they're on fucking lithium, which I guess that's kind of part of the point. But it just kind of has like a lifelessness to it, and I feel like it's like the recording, maybe not so much the song. Like I imagine playing that on live, they probably had a lot more energy that they would bring to it, and it was a lot cooler. But I'm just not in love with that song. It just kind of drags for me.
I have a story about that song, and maybe I think you hit on something. So yeah, I would agree with you that the song is kind of lifeless on the recording. Well, it came out that not too long ago. I think Butch Vig talked about it in an interview, the producer of the album.
We should talk about it.
He said that the band had such a hard time keeping time with the song when they were recording it, that this is the only song on the record that they used a click track to, a metronome.
And that's why
the song sounds so rigid. Is because they couldn't get the timing down from the verse melody and the verse feel to the pre-chorus to the chorus. And so you hear it, and I know exactly what you're talking about, Travis. The recorded version is not as good as the live versions that I've heard on bootlegs.
I'm sure. I can only imagine.
Yeah, this one, I do agree with you that the recording is a bit lifeless. The other ones have this vibe to it, like all three guys are playing together and they did it in one or two takes. Vibe you want to have. This one doesn't have that feel. If I were to pick a shitty recorded song of Nirvana's, that's probably one of them. Right there.
Well, I feel validated. Thank you for that explanation, because that's it exactly. This album is so big on passion, and on that one, that passion just doesn't seem like it's there.
Yeah, I got your back on that one. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
You did. I mean, again, it's a good song. I've always liked the song. The video is very cool. I still like it. It's the one that like I just feel like it's like when things kind of dip on the album for me. And Polly a little bit too. I still like Polly, but like the lyrical content of Polly is so fucking disturbing, which is the point. I get the satire that he's doing here, but Polly's a little rough too, if I'm honest.
Well, since I've listened to the album so much, I can do a deep dive into nitpicking things, and I understand like when someone like you is saying the little nuances of, I'm not too crazy about this song for this reason, or like you were talking about for Polly, it's the lyrical content that seems a bit disturbing. And, let's not overlook the fact that Kurt recorded that damn acoustic track on a shitty 5-string acoustic with a broken string that was out of tune. Okay.
Cool.
So there's all these stories behind these songs and stuff. So, I mean, when you hear it, you're instantly, well, at least for me, you're instantly taken back to those stories behind the song, and you know why it sounds the way it does. And you might not agree with it totally, but you can kind of go, yeah, okay, I see maybe why or why not.
Oh, you got to respect the fuck out of it. I do. And I do like the song. I do. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's just not my favorite on there. It's the other one I kind of played with as a potential least favorite, I guess. But let's get back into the funner part of talking about what we do love about this album. Picking an underrated one, you could almost just pick anyone that wasn't a single, right? Because in a weird way, like especially the back half of this album, I mean, I'm not saying they're forgotten songs or anything, because this is one of the biggest albums of all time, but those singles loom so large. So I'm curious, what song did you pick to be your underrated?
Well, I was looking at it from the standpoint of, and I factor a few things into this first. So that's
right. You're very particular about this.
I would agree with you that, okay, so Nirvana only released 4 singles off of the album, and they were all off the A side. Had they toured extensively into 92, into 93, and In Utero doesn't come out in 93, had they still kept going with this record, because they could have gotten so much more mileage out of it, right?
Yeah, you're right.
They could have toured for 2 or 3 years off of this and made a shitload of money off touring. And every time you tour, you got to release a single. They could have easily gone 7, 8 singles deep and started to dig on the B side of things, okay?
Yeah.
And as you start to look through it, Travis, I get all the way to the end of the record, and my most underrated song, and I think you mentioned this one at the beginning of our podcast, was I think On a Plane is highly underrated.
Thank you. Yes.
Start this song without any words. I got so high, I scratched till I bled. Love myself better than you. Know it's wrong, so what should I do? The finest day I've ever had is when I learned to cry on command. Love myself better than you. Know it's wrong, so what should I do? I'm on a plane, I can't complain. I'm on a plane.
The first melody is so freaking strong, And it's just got this Beatlesque feel when they're singing, the Love Myself Better Than You. It's undeniably catchy. I can't not avoid the song. I always listen to it. I think the recorded version is unique because of all the noise at the beginning of the song, and I think that was done on intent and purpose to keep it in there. And then the fade out, it's the only song on the record, I think, that fades out at the end.
Is it really? I think you're right.
There's no hard stop on that song. It's a gentle fade, and then they do the ooh-oohs at the end. So for me, this one's highly underrated because, if they kept touring, they were going to put that out as a single, and it would have slipped under the radar. So yeah, that was mine.
I think that's a great choice, and I think you make a great point about it being one of the more accessible songs on the album. It probably would have been that fifth single. It would have made sense. I mean, yeah, it's not a conventional song exactly, but it's catchy. It's fucking catchy. That's a great choice. I went the other way on that one in terms of picking my underrated song from this album. I think that Territorial Pissings is the most underrated song on this album.
Come on, people now! Smile on your brother! Everybody get together! Try to love one another right now!
It's a good one.
It's a badass fucking song. I think it says really, really cool things about us as a human species that this song could be on one of the biggest albums of all time. This is a fucking thrash song. This song is intense, man. This song is crazy. I love it. It's like no holds barred, in your face, like screaming, just like, fuck you. This is wild shit. And there's like little kids like me like running around singing this shit and like rocking out to it. It is so fucking cool.
Two quick things about that song, Travis. So you've probably seen the Jonathan Ross show from 1991 on YouTube, in which Nirvana in 91 were scheduled to play the show. It was Jonathan Ross's talk show when they were touring England. It's on the Live Tonight Sold Out DVD, and it's so great because Jonathan Ross thinks that Nirvana is going to play Lithium when they come out. But what does Kurt do? He turns on a dime last minute and starts playing Territorial Pissing on there, and it's
awesome.
So fucking awesome. There's so much energy that comes off of the song when you're watching it. It's like, holy shit, that's a one hell of a performance. That's at the end where Jonathan Ross gets him back at the end. He's like, thank you very much indeed. Oi, hoping to wake the neighbors up. And he's like, on Nirvana, they're doing the tune that we didn't actually expect, but they wanted me to tell you they're available for children's birthday parties and bar mitzvahs.
Yeah, that song's a fucking face melter.
The other quick story is, so when I was looking at the songwriting credits, because I really get into my favorite records and find out who writes what, okay?
That's great.
So in Territorial Pissing, it's written by Kurt Cobain and Chet Powers. And I don't know who the hell Chet Powers is, so I get to do my research on this. Well, Chet Powers was the guy who wrote, Come On, Get Together.
Oh,
people now.
I thought the name sounded from the Youngbloods or whatever, right?
Yeah. So what Kurt did was he properly attributed Chet Powers to get songwriting credit because they speak those lines from the song at the beginning. And it was a way for Chet Powers to get additional royalties paid to him for the use of those lyrics, which I thought was a great gesture by the band. Oh, yeah.
It was intentional. Oh, my God. That's so cool.
Yeah. Kurt included Chet Powers on the songwriting credits, so his family would get the royalties paid to them.
That is fucking cool as shit. And he was always doing stuff like that. Like, he was such a promoter, bringing the Meat Puppets onto the Unplugged album, always wearing like obscure band shirts. I remember I got into the band Flipper because he had a fucking Flipper t-shirt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he was always big on like promoting these smaller acts and these acts that that he liked, that had an influence on him. That's a really great story. I'm glad you shared that.
Oh yeah. That was really, when I found that out, I was like, man, that's impactful.
Yeah, that's cool.
And Chet's family and all that. I mean, think about the residuals from that. And that's like a lasting legacy there for years and years.
He was so like anti-misogynistic and like anti-racist and all this stuff that he was just, sometimes in the lyrics, sometimes overtly in like his speeches and like, what he would say in interviews and on TV and stuff. he was just such a kind dude, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of his stuff was calculated when he had the ability to speak in front of an audience
Hmm.
and share his thoughts. Because if you've read the liner notes from Incesticide, a lot of the things you just pointed out, he touched on in there about if you're a racist, if you're a homophobe, if you hate
Hmm.
women, don't come to our shows and don't
I
buy our
remember that.
records,
I remember that.
man.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a pretty fucking great dude. And of course, the other two guys, Grohl and Novoselic, are just top notch performers. And I did on this show, I did In Utero. And I will say that the bass lines are much clearer and upfront on this album than on In Utero. So I do understand Novoselic's frustrations.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. You could nitpick little things like that and do comparisons. And so, yeah, you can see the frustration on the other end of things too.
It's a really well produced album. Nevermind. I mean, Butch Vig really he knew what he was doing.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. It's a shame though that Butch Vig kind of pooped out during the mixing and mastering process once it was all recorded, and they were going over budget at the time too.
Hmm.
And so to bring in Andy Wallace to kind of help finish the job, I think was a pretty decent move because, when you're making a major label debut like that, you're bringing in some heavy hitters to bring the music out and put it in its best light.
And he was a accomplished producer himself at the time, so that was a good choice. It worked. It clearly worked out for everybody.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
All right, man. Anything else you want to say about this album before we move on?
Yeah, I think so. I think
I had a feeling.
as it touches me personally, Travis, this record, had I not found this record, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I wouldn't be talking to you at all. I wouldn't have met Dustin, our good friend. I wouldn't have met my drummer, Melanie Marshall, from my own band.
Mm-hmm.
I never would have met a lot of people along the way. I never would have bothered to learn how to play guitar. I mean, because if it wasn't for Nirvana, I never would have picked up guitar and learned how to play.
Wow.
I sat in my room, in my parents' house, growing up for years. The first 2 years probably playing guitar, thinking about that, when I was thinking about this today, playing guitar, I had a Nirvana songbook and I had, a guitar, an amp, and a microphone, and that's it. And Nirvana was the catalyst for me to play music. Because Kurt was left-handed, I'm left-handed as well, and seeing him be successful in a band playing left-handed, I'm like, man, that looks like something I could do. It looks like a lot of fun, Because I always liked Edward Van Halen and Van Halen's music, but the problem with that was that Edward Van Halen was doing a lot of stuff on guitar that looked so difficult to do that I don't even think I could have matched, one or two notes with what he was doing. But Kurt was playing simple power chords and singing at the same time, and that looked like a lot of fun. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta try that. And so it's because of Nevermind and it's because of Bleach and In Utero that prompted me to go and get my first guitar, learn how to play, and then eventually form my first band, play a show, and then meet some incredible people along the way, along this journey to get here today to talk to you. I mean, when I connect the dots, this record has a significant impact on my life. And I'm really thankful that I came across it, and I'm really thankful that the music spoke a message to me that I listened. I listened to it, and I woke up and I'm like, oh yeah, I get you guys. I know what you're about. This is really good stuff.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, man. And not to minimize your story, but hopefully to add to it, think of how many other people could say something similar. The way that this album touched their life, changed their life. I know I kind of started this whole thing saying, like, let's not overemphasize this album's importance, but at the same time, I don't want to undersell it either. I mean, you are a prime example of one of the hundreds of thousands, millions, I don't know, of people that life took a turn one way or another because not just even this band, but this album.
Yeah, I can't imagine what would happen had I not come across this record, because I know my life would have turned out a lot different. And I would agree with you. I think it's probably in the millions of people that this record has touched in one way or another.
Yeah.
Give it some significance in their life. I mean, look at the YouTube views on these videos. It Smells Like Teen Spirit is in the billions now. That's insane.
And, I teach, so I see a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers. And when we were teenagers, you saw a lot of Led Zeppelin shirts and Pink Floyd shirts and all that shit. You don't see hardly anything anymore from our generation's music except for Nirvana shirts.
That's right. You can go to a hockey game. You can go to Target and buy a freaking Nirvana shirt, dude. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You see people at fairs festivals. You see them in group settings, okay?
Yep.
I always do this. I say, no matter who I'm with, I said, let's count how many Nirvana t-shirts we see. And usually it's between 3 and 5 in an hour or two that I'm out walking around or doing something socially. And so to have that kind of impact today, to say that these songs resonate with new generations that come up, that find this music, discover it, okay? The Spotify numbers are through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube numbers are through the roof. It prompted them to reissue, Geffen and Interscope and the whole conglomerate of Universal, reissued Nevermind, the 30th anniversary issue back in 2021. I mean, just the fact that they could do that, releasing the music to a brand new generation of people, and they love it.
Yeah.
I mean, not just like it, they love the hell out of it. That speaks volumes as to what I would consider, and again, I'm going to get an argument from people, that Nirvana, to me, is kind of like, in a way, the Beatles of our generation, in a way, because of the blow up and the significant impact that their music had on a lot of people.
I mean, he's a tragic figure that was much beloved, so it's going to stick with us for that reason alone. Then you take the nature of this music that is so beloved, even though it's not something that is like the Beatles. You listen to the Beatles. Now, I love the Beatles, don't get me wrong, but even at their strangest, they're pretty accessible, especially like on the album as a whole. There might be a really weird fucking song on there, but the album as a whole was still pretty accessible. There wasn't any territorial pissings on Sgt. Pepper's. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I understand.
This stuff is so abrasive in a good way.
Right.
And that it could still resonate with generations of people, regardless of race or color or, ethnic background. It's really, really great. It's special.
It's angst in a bottle. And there's nothing that speaks to a younger generation of people than trying to convey your angst to someone and have them share that, because there are things that maybe the younger people don't agree with. They share viewpoints of rebellion in some ways. Maybe it's against their parents. Maybe it's against, the government. Maybe it's against whomever. And when music has that type of energy and passion and vibe, people pick up on that right away, no matter who's playing that type of music. Kurt Cobain had the way of doing it that he mixed pop sensibilities with anger. And when you combine those two together, it's like water and battery acid. You're going to get some sort of explosion in the middle somewhere. And that explosion, I like to think that explosion is something in a good way, because it touches so many people after that fallout. And even, like I said, 3 decades later, people are discovering the music and they're loving it. And I think that's a huge impact that I don't even think Kurt expected that to happen at some point,
I think you're right. Yeah, it says something that no matter how big and famous they got or still are, that authenticity has not worn down at all.
Correct. Yeah.
So to wrap things up, I've got a little bit of trivia for you, which has kind of been my mainstay of doing the end of my episodes lately. I'll give you 9 options here.
Okay.
In honor of my other podcast that I'm a co-host on, Cinema 9 movie podcast. You were last on talking about Pulp Fiction, a movie soundtrack. So I'm going to offer you 9 movies. You tell me if Nirvana is featured on the soundtrack of these movies or not.
Okay, this is a good one. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Just totally random movies. All right. Ready Player One.
I'll say no.
You are correct. It is not on the soundtrack.
Yep.
A Time to Kill from 1996, that John Grisham movie with Sam Jackson.
I'm going to say yes.
Incorrect. It is not on there.
So they're not on there either. Okay.
They're not on there either. Moulin Rouge.
I should say yes, even though I'm not confident.
You are correct. Smells Like Teen Spirit is featured in Moulin Rouge.
It's in Moulin Rouge? I don't think I've ever seen that movie. Really?
You did good. Yeah, you did good.
No way.
Singles.
No.
They are not.
I saw that movie. It's not. Yep.
Yep, like every other grunge band is, but not Nirvana. The Batman.
Which version?
The most recent one from 2022 with Robert Pattinson.
Yes.
Very much so. Something in the Way features heavily in that movie, like in 2 or 3 scenes, right? And it's awesome. Right. Yep. To do it so well. The 2018 film with Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet called Beautiful Boy, about addiction.
I'm going to say no.
Incorrect. Territorial pissings of all songs shows up in this family drama.
No way.
I've never seen it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to see it now.
The Purge election year.
The Purge election year. No.
You are correct. It is not in there. Godzilla versus Kong.
Yes.
Nope.
Really? Oh man, I thought maybe something would be in there.
It seems like it would fit for some weird reason, which is why I chose it. Also, I was looking at one of my Funko Pops that is from that movie, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
All right, last one. Captain Marvel.
Oh yeah, there's got to be a song in there.
You are correct. It's a 90s film. Come As You Are is featured in Captain Marvel. You passed.
Awesome.
You did great. You got 2, 4, 6. You got 6 out of 9 correct. That is definitely a passing grade.
Not bad. Hey, I have 2 little anecdotes on these to add to it for you.
Love it. Hit
Drew
me.
Barrymore did a movie in the mid-90s, I think, called Mad Love. It was a really, I'll be honest, it's a real shitty movie.
Yeah, it didn't do well. I remember.
It didn't do well. Love Buzz is in that movie.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. And if you remember the television show on ABC called Lost from late 2000s to 2010.
Mm-hmm. Something in the Way was featured on that too, right?
Yeah. So in one of the episodes, I think it's like 6 seasons. I think in season 4, season 5, one of the main characters, Jack Shepherd, is rolling up in a Bronco to a funeral home. And in the Bronco, he's bumping Scentless Apprentice.
That's cool. That's a great song.
Yes. Yeah. So I do have my Nirvana ears up when I'm watching particular shows. And if I hear something, I start laughing. I'm going, oh my God, they licensed it to this one? No kidding.
Yeah, it's kind of fun when it shows up in a movie because you're like, oh yeah, especially if it's something period appropriate. It's like, yeah, you kind of have to. If you're going to do like a 90s movie like Captain Marvel, you kind of have to put some Nirvana in there, right?
In closing, Travis, now you mentioned those movies that have these particular songs in there. A number of years ago, I read a story that Courtney Love sold 25% of her publishing rights interest in Nirvana songs because she owned, I think, all of Kurt's, which was 97%, I think. So she sold 25% of the publishing interest for about $50 million.
Wow.
And she said in a press release that they're going to take Nirvana's music to places it had never been before. And so these movies would be the places that it had never been before. So that's why I think they're showing up in these particular movies now, is to expose it to new audiences.
It's a good point. Yeah, especially in stuff like the superhero movies, it kind of makes sense. You know, they're big blockbusters, put a big song in there, but something that still fucking rules. Yeah, makes sense. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show, dude. It's always great to get to talk to you. Your enthusiasm and your love for every album that we've done is always fun to be around, but it was extra heightened for this album, which is great. Thank you.
Travis, I appreciate your time, brother. It's always great to see and talk with you. I'm glad we get a chance to do these. And, maybe down the road we'll get a chance to do another one soon.
I certainly hope so. You are always welcome back, man. Great talking with you.
Thank you very much, brother.
Take care.
Take care.
I'd like to again thank Mike Krupinski for coming back on the show to talk Nirvana with us. Us being you and me and him, I guess. Snapcat Bandits. That is the name of his band. Check them out. They're on Spotify, YouTube, all of the places. Tidal? Is that still a thing? I have no idea. But I know that his band, Snapcat Bandits, is definitely influenced by Nirvana. So check them out. I'm always trying to get new guests to come on the show. I like old friends to come on the show. I like complete strangers to come on the show. I like to cast a wide net. If you, listener, want to come on the show, maybe you're thinking, I can't talk about Nirvana. The show's already covered Nevermind and the Unplugged in New York album and In Utero. But you've forgotten, for instance, this song right here.
And if you save yourself, you will make him happy. Keep you in a job, and you'll think you're happy. He'll give you breathing holes, then you'll think you're happy. He'll cover you with gas, then you'll think you're happy.
This is Verse, Chorus, Verse, the hidden track that Nirvana contributed to the 1993 compilation album No Alternative. It was an HIV/AIDS benefit album that featured not just Nirvana, but, so many bands and acts. Sarah McLachlan, Pavement, Buffalo Tom, Urge Overkill, Matthew Sweet, tons of people were on this thing. If you want to come on the show and talk about that album with me, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. I'd love to talk No Alternative. Or maybe, any other album from the era. Almost any other album from the era. All you gotta do is email me at 9394podcast@gmail.com, or you could just drop me a line and say hello. That's always welcome too, and appreciated. I am recording this at the tail end of the holiday break after the new year, and man, I've really gone into full recluse mode. I love just staying on my couch and not having to start my car all day long. It's gonna be a real fucking bummer for me and my dogs when I gotta go back to work here come Monday. I have enjoyed a nice long holiday stretch, and if you are listening to this episode in real time where it's early in the year 2025 for you as well, I wish you a happy new year, and I wish you all the best in this coming new year. If you want to hear more from me, if this isn't enough somehow, I do have two other podcasts. You can catch me at Small Screen Sessions, a TV show podcast that I have with my friends Steve and Amanda, and Cinema 9, a movie podcast that I have with my friends Eric and Mike. And any other big things to say? Rate and review the show, please. It does help. Apple and Spotify, click those 5 stars, pretty please. And yeah, okay. Goodbye. Thanks. Bye. 9394, a music podcast with Travis Roy, is a labor of love. It is not and never will be monetized. Please don't sue.